with a stark warning from Sir Tony Blair to his party and to the country in his first major intervention in domestic politics since the election. He doesn't weigh in on the specifics of the leadership crisis facing Sir Keir Starmer and doesn't endorse any potential successor, but warns that the Labour Party does not have a coherent plan for government. Your thoughts, Rachel, first of all?
Well, it's unusual to see an intervention quite at that length from the former Prime Minister. But his main pitch, from what I can work out, is go back to the radical centre. He says where policy comes first and politics comes last. Now, one of the big criticisms of Keir Starmer's government has been that it's too focused on policy and not enough on politics and ideology. So I'm not quite sure what Tony Blair is suggesting, except that Keir Starmer does better.
Ali, harsh criticism or fair?
I think there is some fairness to it. He's saying that Labour has to not govern from its soft left comfort zone, which is exactly where it is at the moment. Look, he's a winner. He won 3 general elections. He's the most successful Labour Prime Minister in history. There is one slight problem, though. His epitaph will be Iraq. So no one's going to take anything that Tony Blair says seriously, because that was the most cack-handed debacle, which will be forever what we remember of Tony Blair.
Should we take a look at some of what he's written as part of that 5,000-word-long essay? The former Prime Minister said the Labour Party is playing with fire, or more accurately, with its future and that of the country. We don't have a worked-out, coherent plan for the country in a fast-changing world and are in the wrong political position from which we can devise one and win a second term. He goes on to warn of the fate of the country that we could meet, saying, without an agenda of this nature, radical but sensible, Britain will continue its long slide towards relegation from the Premier League of Nations. Well, our political correspondent, Lucy McDade, joins us. Lucy, very harsh, seemingly, from Tony Blair. This is really the first intervention of this kind that we've seen, isn't it?
Yeah, the first intervention of this kind, exactly that. Here it is, about 5,000 words, 10 pages. I've printed this off in honour of John Craig, who always comes with everything printed off just to show the length of the scale. You're right, Tony Blair has made a number of interventions through his institute, the Tony Blair Institute. He's spoken about energy, saying that the party needs to prioritise cheap energy over clean energy. So this isn't the first, but it's pretty scathing. It's not flattering. And while he's not saying here Keir Starmer must resign, we've heard those calls from a number of people, almost 100 Labour MPs. Wes Streeting, who was Health Secretary, said the same. But what he is saying is that while this isn't about Keir Starmer's personality, this is about a party who he says didn't come into power with a coherent plan, didn't set a direction. And he says, if you don't set your own direction, somebody will for you. And he talks about, as you were saying, Labour needs to occupy the radical centre if it stands a chance of beating what he calls the radical left, being the Green Party, and the radical right, Reform. Let's face it, this comes at a time where the Prime Minister probably hasn't ever been under as much pressure as he is now. So doing this in public says all you need to know, really, that Keir Starmer is in a very difficult position. Maybe, as a critical friend, this is somebody he would want to listen to.
But is he helping Sir Keir Starmer by coming out at this point with such harsh criticism?
They're certainly not helping Andy Burnham. I mean, look, Keir Starmer, people have made their minds up one way or the other about Sir Keir Starmer. I think his days are numbered one way or the other. We know that. This is really taking aim at Andy Burnham, because the idea is that the King of the North rides in on some white charger and saves us. And he is basically the Labour Messiah. What Blair is effectively saying here is that your entire soft left, pushed to the left even more than what Starmer is doing, is completely ill-judged and wrong. He talks very specifically about policies like the minimum wage and welfare. He wants to cut welfare. He wants to cut tax. He said you need to govern from the radical centre. And on foreign affairs, he basically is saying we should be in lockstep with the US. Now, a lot of people in the Labour Party, and indeed the country more at large, will think, hang on a second, is this the same Tony Blair who wants us to be a supplicant to the US as we were in Iraq, which has actually led to some of the trust deficit in large part that many people in the country, including myself, feel in politics? So I think on that thing, he's got a very lack of credibility. But on the welfare point, I think he's right.
I mean, he's saying that policy first, politics last, to reverse the decline and win a second term. Excuse me. He's not so much concerned with the leadership challenge and saying that's irrelevant if it doesn't start with the policy debate.
Yes, he's very careful not to sort of come out in favour of any of the contenders, and actually says to the Labour Party, you know, be careful, switching leaders might have consequences. He talks about it being playing with fire. But I think, you know, to Ali's point, this intervention isn't really aimed at Keir Starmer. It's aimed at Labour MPs who are currently having a debate in closed rooms, in private and increasingly in public, about the direction of the party, the government, and who they might want to lead it. So I think that point about the soft left being the comfort zone and Labour needing to move to the quote-unquote radical centre if they are to win the next election, that's a warning to Labour MPs who are looking at the offerings of Andy Burnham, Wes Streeting, Keir Starmer if he wants to fight on, and various others, and having a think about the direction their party is going. I would say, though, we've only seen extracts. Lisa, you've got the full 10 pages there. There's a lot of criticism about what has gone wrong. I didn't see so far in the copy that I've got many concrete ideas for what we need to do other than have a more dynamic economy, you know, lower taxes, higher growth, and all the things that we would all love, but know that it's actually quite difficult to get there.
Yeah, I think also something to point out, and again, really quite scathing, Tony Blair himself saying Labour didn't win the 2024 election by acclaim, but by being an acceptable, he puts in brackets, credit to Keir Starmer, default option to a Conservative government the country felt had behaved unacceptably. And I think that point about, it's been coined before, the phrase a loveless landslide, how Labour won. You mentioned there about MPs, this being a letter to them. In a way, Labour has found itself quite paralysed by the size of its majority at times, I think. You know, welfare comes out in this as one of the big things Tony Blair says Keir Starmer needs to tackle. But remember, they had to water down most of their welfare reforms because they didn't have the backing of their Labour backbenchers. This is a problem for Keir Starmer. If he wants to be radical, which is what a number of people, not just Tony Blair, are calling for at the moment, he knows, I know you're going to talk about social media soon, aren't you, and a possible ban. That is one suggestion of where Keir Starmer could be radical, but will he have the support of his Labour backbenchers? He's in a weak position at the moment as well because of so many of them calling for him to resign.
And Ali, you've characterised it as you have as well, Rachel, as not an attack on Sir Keir Starmer, but on Andy Burnham and other factions within the party. But, I mean, if he's saying that the party has no policies, how can that not be an attack on Starmer?
Well, he's not saying the party doesn't have any policies. He's saying the party's got the wrong policies. I mean, he's talking very specifically about the minimum wage. He's talking about workers' rights. He's talking about
he's saying no
net zero.
coherent worked-out plan, though.
He's saying no coherent worked-out plan, but he's also taking aim very specifically at some of the policies that the government has brought in, which has actually not led to growth. The central mantra of this government, as I understood it, as we all understood it, was to actually drive growth in this country. And the policies they've actually implemented are doing completely the opposite of that. I know we had 0.6% growth in the last month or whatever. We should whoopee-doo. I mean, wonderful. We're not going to get very far with that. And you can't keep borrowing to spend on welfare. The welfare bill is just getting out of control. Tony Blair understands that. He's right to understand that. But where I depart from Tony Blair is when he says on foreign policy, we are going to be heading towards complete irrelevance. That's all fine, Sir Tony, but we're not going to take you seriously on foreign policy after Iraq. I mean, I think he has to understand. I saw him at Ditchley just whenever it was a couple of years ago. He's still got the soundbite. He's still a brilliant communicator. We know his gifts, of which are many. But this is a clear message to the Labour Party, those on the left in particular. I mean, frankly, and you can see how much the Labour Party is moving to the left, in that Streeting doesn't have a chance, and Shabana Mahmood, who's probably the most right-wing Home Secretary, right? My Tories would applaud her, is not even on the leadership ticket.
You do wonder if Keir Starmer will listen to or read this paper. I mean, we've seen him recently appoint Gordon Brown as his global finance envoy. So you might read into this and think, OK, well, actually, he's closer to Gordon Brown, perhaps a man who feels he has more in common with. You know, I was just reading earlier, Tony Blair perhaps is intimidated by the fact he is he is the party's most successful leader. So maybe this will kind of go into his paper tray and he won't even bother reading it. He does have a number of other things in his in tray at the moment, but people will be talking about it, whether they're dismissing it because of Tony Blair's tenure. yeah, it's another intervention. It's another
Yeah.
kind of drip of those voices coming out, and that's not helpful.